So my book was Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. A quick summary. So Schreier delves into the behind-the-scenes stories of various games, various well-known games such as Diablo 3, Destiny, The Witcher 3, Uncharted 4. And the whole purpose of the book is to examine the technical, personal, and creative challenges that video game developers encounter day to day in the video game industry. And some of these things that are covered in extensive detail are the technical issues that video game developers come across, the issue of crunch, which is something I'll get into in more detail in a little bit, deadlines, and the pressures of meeting player expectations. So, a little bit about the author. He is an American journalist and author who primarily covers the video game industry. And he worked as a news reporter for Kotaku, which is a video game blog website, for 9 years and was recognized for several investigative stories, particularly on the crunch culture in the video game industry. So I broke down the contents into three sections. So, chapter one was mostly about how interactivity creates unique challenges. Chapter two, hardware and software change constantly. And chapter three, scheduling is difficult. So, getting into chapter one, which is interactivity creates unique challenges. So, game developers they have to consider so many things when developing a video game. And for example, let's say you're playing a game where a player can interact with an in-game character. So first you have to consider, well, can that player even interact with that character? If so, what does the character say to the player? Does the player choose a response? Can they choose a response? If so, what is that response? And based on the response that they choose, what will the in-game character say back to them, etc. And so this leads to developers having to create so many lines of dialogue. For example, these three games I have up here on the screen are some of the most well-known games um, uh, in modern gaming. So a game called Elder Scrolls Skyrim has 60,000 lines of dialogue. Fallout 4 has 110,000 lines. And a game called Starfield, which was just recently released, has over 250,000 lines. So, chapter two, hardware and software change constantly. So, video game developers have to adapt very often to new tools and existing technology, because technology changes so rapidly. The technology that they're using at the beginning of a project may not be what they end up using by the end of the project, because games take years to make. So, they may migrate from a game engine to another game engine. And an example of this is in the game called Dragon Age Inquisition. It's a role-playing game. The video game developers had to use the Frostbite gaming engine instead of the previous gaming engine that they used. And because the Frostbite gaming engine was made for a different genre of games called first-person shooters, the developers for Dragon Age had to program custom tools to enable basic functionalities such as swinging a sword, because the Frostbite engine just doesn't have those mechanics built into it. And so another thing about the Frostbite engine is that it got frequent updates, and each update required the Dragon Age team to manually move all of their code from the old version of the engine to the new one. So definitely very painstaking. And lastly, scheduling is difficult. So a lot of video game developers, and this is something that is very one of the biggest negatives of being a video game developer is crunch time. And so, because development cycles often take longer than expected, video game developing companies expect and mandate their video game developers to pull mandatory overtime. So, a lot of gaming developers are working 14-hour days. They're working past midnight, especially as the game gets closer and closer to launch. And this was the case with Uncharted 4. So the video game development company called Naughty Dog, um, their employees shared that they had to often work past midnight for days on end just to hit their deadlines, and including on weekends, leading up to the release of a very one of Naughty Dog's best-selling games, Uncharted 4. And this is not something that's isolated. According to a 2019 survey from the Game Developers Association, 40% of game developers reported experiencing crunch at least once over the past year, and only 8% reported receiving extra pay for their crunch hours. So you're mandated to do these extra hours, but sometimes you're not even, paid anything extra. And that's the reason why a lot of employees from Naughty Dog quit after the game was released, because they had been burned out so much. Another instance of crunch is in a game called Stardew Valley. A man named Eric Barone worked on this game by himself. So, he was the sole developer, he was the animator, the designer, the programmer, the music composer for the game's soundtrack. Stardew Valley is like a farming simulator game. It's one of the most well-loved um, games out there. And he had to work 8 to 15-hour days for 4 years to finish the game, because, he was doing everything by himself. So, crunch happens in a company, happens when you're doing it on your own as well. Um, Either way, definitely not a fun thing to have to go through. And now here are just some of the reviews on Audible about this book. So a lot of people like the narrator, and that's because the narrator is actually a voice actor. So he has appeared in a lot of different games as well. So that was pretty cool that they chose him for this. I thought it was very fitting to have, a video game voice actor kind of read through this. And then the review on the bottom uh, wasn't so fond of the book. They said it was kind of just gossip. I don't really agree. I thought that these were stories that, I was not really well aware of, and they are true, and, you know, definitely gives insight into how hard these developers work um, to get the games out and to kind of please as many people as they can. So overall, I'll get to my review, which is I said that Blood, Sweat, and Pixels provides a compelling look behind the scenes of video game development. With engaging storytelling, it reveals the passion and challenges faced by developers, making it an insightful exploration of the human side of the gaming industry. So, definitely one of my more favorite books that I've read this semester. And that is all. Thank you.